Hello, and welcome to today's cup of blueberry tea, which comes with a very special human. Someone who has spent a lifetime inside leadership at the highest stakes, while quietly studying the deepest questions about what it means to be human. My guest is Mark Crosweller, former leader in national disaster and emergency response, Australian Fire Service Medal recipient, founder of Ethical Intelligence, and author of Compassion in Disaster Management, the essential ethic of relational leadership. Mark's work invites us to rethink leadership, not as command and control, but as humility, compassion, relational awareness, and the courage to actually care. And yes, caring can be courageous. Whether we are talking about bushfires, government crises, or the messy, unpredictable adventure of being human, he's seen compassion change outcomes in very real, very tangible ways. Now, Mark doesn't only speak from lived experience. He studies Buddhist teachings, he explores metaphysics, and he's somehow managed to bring philosophy, disaster management, and compassion into the same conversation without sounding like he swallowed an academic library. So, brew something good and settle in. This is going to stretch you, like it did me, in the most grounded and compassionate way. Alrighty, Mark, it's really special to be here with you and Lucy, Matilda, and Oscar, your dear friends out here. And I would like to start us off with the second book that you are working on at the moment with regards to metaphysics. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Metaphysics is a big subject. It sort of categorises philosophically how we perceive life and where we come from, where we go. It's a really big topic, but I talk about it in the context of consciousness, and I've sort of had enough lived experience to shift the premise of my thinking from believing in metaphysics or consciousness continuing to knowing that it does. So that's where my interest lies in metaphysics. It's about the continuation of consciousness, and I've studied it for 20 years. My dear wife Carolyn, who passed away 2.5 years ago, also studied it at the same time that I met her, and she got me even more interested in it than I already had been. And there's a bit of an irony to that, because since she's passed across to the world of spirit, or to the next realm of consciousness, she comes back and speaks to me in profoundly validating ways. So it's almost as though she prepared the ground for me in our 16 years that we were together. Cut the path, prepared the ground, helped me to continue to research and understand and read about metaphysics. And lo and behold, we now use that as a channel to communicate from one realm to another.
Mm-hmm. And in which way have you been hearing messages from Carolyn?
So there's a number of ways. Metaphysics, or before we started this interview, I'll use some words I'll reuse. It's kind of like, it's sort of ineffable. So it's a feeling state. It's sensory. It's intuitive. It's kind of ineffable in that language is insufficient to describe what that communication might feel like. But it turns up in for example, in dreams, in dream states, and it turns up through third parties such as mediums. And people have a lot of opinions about mediums and psychics, and there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of people who pretend they are who clearly are not. There's a lot of exploitation that goes on in that space, and it's gone on for centuries. So people have a right to be skeptical or cynical about the proposition of consciousness continuing. I take a skeptical view as an academic and PhD qualified scholar, and I've got methods and ways of researching and understanding things which have to satisfy my conscience and have to satisfy my own standards. And I've been able to do that with Carolyn's passing. So she communicates in dream states, and she communicates through a third party. And she does so in extremely validating ways, which have moved me from belief to knowledge. And I'm happy to talk about those more.
Yeah, please, keep going.
So she passed away 2.5 years ago, tragically, and without warning. She had an undiagnosed brain tumour. She'd had headaches about 6 weeks before it was found. The doctors put it down to menopause or anything other than brain tumour. Nobody thought to scan her. The headaches are getting worse and worse. She went to work one day and took ill. And long story short, the work insisted she went to hospital. She rang me to say she was on her way to hospital, and she downplayed how sick she really was. And she got there, and I got a message back. And when I talked to her, as I said, she reassured me she was okay, but wanted to go to hospital to get checked up. I got a message back. That was about midday. About 1:30, I got a message back from one of her staff saying she was in good hands. She was with the doctors, and they were looking after her. So I relaxed a little, but I was still worried. And her and I had an agreement. I'd go to hospital straight after work and sit with her until they found out what was going on. 4 o'clock, I get a message, a panicked message from her staff member saying that she's collapsed and she's not breathing. And can I get to hospital straight away? So I left what I was doing and raced to the hospital. Got to the emergency department about 20 minutes later, and she was being prepped for surgery. And the surgeon looked at me and said, if we don't get her into surgery now, she's going to die. And do you want to kiss her goodbye? So tears streaming down my face in the emergency department. She's on the gurney ready for surgery, or being prepped for surgery. So I give her a kiss goodbye and off she goes. I sat outside that operating theatre for 5 hours, not knowing whether she'd survived or not. And he comes out of the theatre and he says, we've saved her life, but she's got a hell of a road ahead of her. I found a brain tumour which had ruptured at the base of her skull. So she was unconscious and unable to breathe on her own. So they put her into ICU, and for 9 days we held out hope that she would survive. But each day passed, it became increasingly obvious that wasn't going to happen. And she died 9 days later. So the saddest day of my life. The night before she was declared brain dead on the Friday, and we were to turn the machines off on the Saturday. And that Friday night, I remember having the end-of-life conversations with her parents, with her brother, with my children, with my family, with the doctors. Navigated all of that, and then felt this overwhelming sense of grief and anger and rage. Those words are insufficient, but there's emotionality welling up inside. And I said to my kids at the time, I need to go. I need to leave. And I went to the car park and sat in the car and lost it. Just completely lost it. And everything I had identified by, knew about, learnt, any sense of home, any sense of identity, it was all gone. Just shattered, completely shattered. One thing remained. That was the love of my wife, Carolyn. It was there like a diamond. It was as clear as a bell. But everything else disappeared. I didn't even know I didn't know which direction to turn the car, because I no longer had a home. I had a house, but it wasn't home because she wasn't here anymore. So that was the start of a long journey of trying to understand, and I was still trying to understand why those things even happen. But about 2 weeks later, she came to me in a dream, and she was lining up to do a training course. Only Carolyn could do, of course. And she walks over and she says, did you get my messages? And I said, what messages? And she goes, I've been sending you messages. And I said, well, I'm not getting them. Anyway, the dream ends and I wake up and I go, wow, that was profound. And it's as real as you and I sitting here. So it's full sensory perception. It's not just a brief image. It's quite realistic. The second dream, we're back at home and we're in our bedroom, and I know she's going to die. And I give her a kiss and a hug, and I kiss her goodbye before she passes away, which I didn't get to do when she died, because she was in hospital and she never woke up. The third dream, we're having a coffee, and she says, don't wallow, get on with your life, make the most of your life while you have it. Easier said than done, I've got to tell you. Mm-hmm. In the fourth dream, she's dancing with an iconic figure, or the spouse of an iconic figure. And I woke up and I went, wow, that is profound. And I'll tell you who it is in a minute. Because I used to dream of this iconic figure, and I would tell her, I wake up and say, so-and-so was in my dream last night. And she'd say, what's that about? And I'd say, I've got no idea. And it happened more than once. It happened about 5 times in the course of my knowing Carolyn. Anyway, a couple of weeks after that dream, a friend of mine reaches out who is a medium, who wouldn't read for me because she's too close. She asked how I was, and I said, look, good days, bad days, awful days. And she said, you need to talk to my friend Louise. And Louise is a medium which I'd never met. I'd read her book years ago, but never met her. She didn't know me, didn't know my circumstances. So I jumped onto her website, and she's internationally acclaimed and very busy, but there was an appointment in 2 days' time, so I took it. And she comes online, and Carolyn validates in the most profound ways. So she described how she passed, she described my house, she described a whole lot of things which validated her presence. Then the medium says, she's showing me that she's dancing with Prince Philip. Does that mean anything to you? And that was my dream state. So I used to dream of the Queen. Now, metaphorically, I'm not saying I literally know the Queen. Let's dispel that myth straight away. But the image of the archetype or the metaphor or the allegory of the Queen, whatever you want to describe it, is what was in my dream. And she's dancing with the Prince Philip. And that was her way of communicating that she was okay. So the medium knew my dream state. How does a medium know my dream state? It's not possible. Unless it's coming through a third party, unless it's coming from Carolyn herself. There were other times when I remember one time I was in the garage, and Carolyn used to insist I clean the spider webs off the house. Now I'm Buddhist, so I like to leave the spiders alone. So the spiders have a very important function, particularly keeping the mosquitoes down. And she'd say, we're not having visitors over until the spider webs are cleaned off the house. I say, yeah, okay, sweetie, I'll clean the spider webs. So anyway, she's passed over about 3 months earlier. I'm in the garage. I look at the spiderweb broom and I say to myself out loud, well, sweetie, I don't have to do that anymore, do I?
No visitors coming?
No visitors coming. And a couple of weeks after that, I spoke to Louise again, and she validated Carolyn's presence in profound ways. And then she says, she's showing me a spiderweb broom. Does that mean anything to you? And of course it does, because that's what I mentioned in the garage 2 weeks earlier. There was another reading where I got in my car and it's covered in dust and there's grass on the floor. Carolyn's car was perfect. She washed it every week. She armor-alled the dashboard every week with a cloth, and you couldn't find a speck of dust anywhere. I say under my breath, you won't be very impressed with this, will you, Carolyn? 2 weeks later, she comes through a medium. She validates 3 or 4 different ways, and then the medium says to me, she's showing me a car washing sponge. Does that mean anything to you? And so the stories go on. So when you look at all the validations, I've only mentioned 3 or 4 of them, but there's been at least a dozen in succession, in sequencing. It's statistically impossible to guess 5 or 6 validations in one reading. It's just not possible to guess them. So I've moved my understanding from belief to knowledge that consciousness continues beyond physical death. Now, where that is, I have no idea. I'm not making spurious claims of heaven or paradise or nirvana or whatever, but there are realms of existence and levels of consciousness that we don't understand, which is where we travel to after we leave this life. And I think that's really interesting. I think that opens up a whole series of questions and propositions which we would do well to think about.
And is it, having heard from Carolyn through the mediator, that you were able, that brought you back to life in a way and brought back your curiosity?
Yeah, it did. I think over time, I mean, existentially, I didn't want to be here. I'd had enough. I couldn't see the point of anything. If you lose the love of your life, if you lose the woman who meant more to you than anything else in the world, who is your soulmate and your best friend, and they're gone, there's not much to live for, really. It wasn't psychological. I didn't need counselling. I didn't need a psychotherapist, but existentially I'd had enough. I thought there's no point in being here. But she keeps coming back to me in dreams and in intuitions and in felt presence and encouraged me to keep going. She's helping me write the second book. She gives me inspiration. She talks about that book when I talk to the medium, which is not that often. I'm not addicted to mediums. I don't have to talk to them every week. But I think if you find someone who's reliable and authentic and professional, they're really interesting. But your mind has to be open, and more importantly, your heart has to be open. And I think we've got to give up this notion that everything has to be scientific and proven. There's a thing called felt knowledge. Intuition is really interesting. There's no language for it really. It's what I call ineffable. So the language doesn't cut it. So if I was to try and describe to you in language what it means to be intuitive, I would struggle. But I know where I am. I know when my intuition is kicked in, when it's inspired by something else. What that is, I do not know. Well, I know it's Carolyn from time to time, but that's about all I can say about it. It's just it's a body of knowledge and a human experience, a felt experience, which I've learned to trust over the last 60 odd years. And the older I get, the more I trust it. And what I say to people is, just be curious about it. Just be curious about consciousness continuing. Why do we come here? I've got propositions about why we come here, which have come to me at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the 4 propositions landed in my mind in my dream state about 9 months ago, and wouldn't leave me till I wrote them down. Every day they would turn up. They just constantly play in my mind till I wrote them down. So I finally wrote them down. And the 4 propositions are simply this: consciousness continues beyond physical death. The universe is moral. Heaven and hell is the truth of moral conscience facing the truth of your life. I'll explain that more in a minute. And the greatest reason for coming here is to profoundly understand and experience love in its absence. So the absence of love is the opportunity to be a compassionate human being, and love is love, of course. So what's this heaven and hell thing about? Well, in parapsychology, people who have near-death experience, who do cross over and come back, and again, the evidence is pretty compelling. When people move into spirit or move into high levels of consciousness and observe their body and hear conversations in other rooms whilst they're lying on the gurney, supposedly dead, is fascinating and compelling. And Raymond Moody's written about this, and Bruce Grayson and other people, reputable scientists and reputable psychiatrists and philosophers, have studied this for over 50 years. And there's a growing body of evidence to suggest that I think that it's interesting. Does it prove anything? I think we're a long way off proving anything, but I think it's interesting that the data is statistically valid. But what people do is they have this replay of their life, and it's in a timeless way, and every experience is replayed, except people don't get to experience how they felt about what happened. They get to experience about how they made people feel. And that's what comes back. So if you think about if you treated people well, that's what will come back in your life review. If you treated people poorly, that's what's going to come back in your life review. I think that's really interesting. I think if that was part of the truth of consciousness, part of the truth of our moral universe, part of the truth of passing over into another realm, we would probably think a lot more about how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves. But many people, I think, go through life with scant disregard as to how they treat themselves and how they treat other people, almost as though it doesn't matter. And I think it profoundly matters. So Caroline's passing, before she passed, she put me on the path of metaphysical inquiry when we met. So it's not something I've recently discovered because my wife passed away. It's something I've been interested in, and there's a bit of an irony here that she might have put me on the path of understanding metaphysics because she knew that would be the way we would communicate when she passed over. She's a very clever girl. Very clever girl. Mm-hmm. So that's where my interest lies. What I want to write about is my experiences of her passing, those metaphysical states and the intuitions that have flowed from them. And then look at the propositions that turn up and explore them and say to people, look, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to empirically prove that something does or doesn't exist. But I want you to think about these things. I want you to think about, what if the universe is moral? What if what you give, you get back? What you take, you lose, both positive and negative, which is the law of karma, which is the Buddhist law of karma. So what you give, you get back. What you take, you lose, positive and negative. So if you give love, you get love. If you take money, you lose money. Give grief, you get grief. You give compassion, you get compassion. It's a really interesting proposition. So I want people to think about that and reframe leadership in a way where people are more considerate of others, based on a metaphysical proposition, not proof, but proposition that maybe these things could be true. And there's some evidence to suggest that possibly they are.
Well, and from your own experiences, it would seem that way as well.
Yeah, it does. I think you get to an age where, and I've been through a lot of my life, more than some and less than others, but you sort of look back and ask yourself, what's it all about? And you could say it's existential and it lacks inherent meaning, and I think that's probably true. But meaning making and purpose is important nonetheless. And I think we come here to learn. I think I said in my TED talk last year that suffering has a function. Adversity is a teacher, and life happens for us, not to us. And those propositions still ring true for me. So, and in the middle of all adversities and all suffering and so on and so forth is lessons of virtue. So, and I know this from a 40-year career in national security and emergency management, watching people go through crisis time after time after time. What sits in the middle of all of it, apart from the practicalities of legislation and policy and frameworks and better this and better that and more money and all that sort of stuff, which is really important. I mean, it's a physical realm that needs to be navigated. But what sits at the heart of it are lessons of virtue, compassion, forgiveness, trust, truthfulness, empathy, kindness. That's what we need to learn. That's what we are learning. That's what gets people through adversity. But to talk about that is often perceived as soft, and soft meaning weak. I can promise you that after 40 years in crisis management, compassion particularly is anything but weak. It's a soft skill because you have to open up. You have to open up your heart and your mind, so it's not easy to do that. But it takes a lot of courage and a lot of wisdom, but it's not weak. It's anything but weak. So people who deny, disavow or ignore people's vulnerability or capacity to suffer are coming from a place of weakness, not a place of strength. So I want to turn that around and reframe that in some way, shape or form.
To make people be thinking that it is a form of strength, not weakness, to have compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Carolyn was one of the most compassionate people I ever met. She just embodied it. And people would meet her and be mesmerised by her capacity to show love and compassion and kindness. And she had embodied it. It wasn't an act. I knew her for 16 years, and she's just the most impressive human being. So she got me thinking about it more than I probably would have if I hadn't have met her. And she continues to help me think about it even now. So what more could I say about it? I'm not quite sure. It depends what question you're going to ask.
Well, that is your way forward from here. But then if you could take us back to maybe not the beginning, but I think throughout your whole life, you have always felt that empathy and compassion and being conscious of people having a purpose and a journey in life to undertake. So what first pulled you towards the intersection of ethics, compassion, and leadership?
I think it was my career. I think I watched. How do I talk about this without sort of being too negative about it? Or I just watched unnecessary things happen inside human systems. So particularly in Commonwealth State Relations, when I was Director General, I saw good people, well-intentioned and well-meaning people, fall into conversations and states of mind which are really unhelpful, quite destructive, aggressive, sometimes nasty. And I used to wonder, what is that about? Why is that even necessary? Why do we have to go there in order to achieve something that we perceive to be good? And the thing we perceive to be good was being grossly undermined by thinking and acting in ways that were detrimental to human flourishing and happiness. And so I did a PhD on it to work out that the essential ethic of relational leadership was to be a compassionate human being.
Compassion in disaster management?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was able to prove that, I was able to put forward an argument that compassion is at the heart of what it means to manage through crisis and disaster and adversity at whatever scale. So, look, Gabby, crisis can be highly overt. The world can see it. It's like bushfires, floods, storms, cyclones, whatever. It can be highly covert. The world can't see it, but it still exists. And I learned throughout the course of my career that many people, in fact most people, suffer some sort of crisis in their life, and many of them don't talk about it because it's embarrassing or they don't have the language for it, but they're suffering nonetheless. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist monk from Vietnam, would say that when people harm somebody else, it's because they're suffering. The harmfulness comes from their suffering. And I was able to understand that quite profoundly throughout the course of my career, and then I studied it. Became a Buddhist 20 years ago, which made it somewhat easier. But I realised it's true, that people hurt each other and hurt themselves because they are suffering, because they've failed to understand the nature of what it means to be a compassionate human being. They have the potential, and at times they can be that way, but they could be that way more. And so Caroline's passing is a profound lesson in self-compassion, Because when the love of your life passes away, one of the things you want to do is go with them. You don't want to be here anymore. Existentially, it's quite unnerving. But that comes from a lack of self-love and self-respect and self-regard, because you don't think life is worth living. You don't think you're worth living. You don't think you've got anything else to contribute. And over time, you realise that maybe that's not true. But grief has a habit of. C.S. Lewis said, "No one ever told him how much grief felt like fear, but fear of nothing, not fear of something, fear of nothing." And I think that's really true. That the sense of fear that arose from Carolyn's passing and the grief that followed was so strong and palpable that I didn't want to be here anymore.
The fear that you were nothing?
Yeah, that nothing was worthwhile.
Nothing without her.
Nothing without her. Nothing was worthwhile. That she was everything to me, and she still is. But there's more than everything to live for. So her presence in spirit, the metaphysical experiences, the way she communicates, eases my existential anxiety about the future. I know she's fine. She's got a great sense of humour. She's got her intellect. I should tell another story, actually, which I think really epitomises the power of her compassion and her love. A good friend of mine, I won't use his real name, lost his son to suicide 12 months ago. And he shared that with me back in February when he'd heard that I lost Carolyn. And he's two grown men on a Teams call, bawling their eyes out for an hour and a half, sharing stories of grief. It's really profoundly moving moments. And about 3 months later, I talked to the medium, and Carolyn validates in numerous unambiguous ways. And then the medium says to me, "Are you aware of a young man who crossed over into spirit through suicide last November?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And she said Carolyn's with him, and she's helping him on the other side. I thought, "That's so Carolyn." And she said the young man wants his father to know that he's okay. And she said, "I'm going to give you his name, write it down." And she goes, "D-A-V-I-D, David. Tell David his son's fine." David was the name of my friend. So Carolyn's with him in spirit, which I have no doubt she would be, because that's Carolyn, helping people who are struggling. She realised the circumstances of the young man's passing, and she realised the father's name. Not a D name, not guessing, spelled it out, D-A-V-I-D. You can't guess this stuff. You can't guess that somebody passed over in November from suicide. His father's name is David, and that I know about that passing through a conversation with his father. It's not possible to guess.
And did you pass that on to David?
I did, and it made him extremely uncomfortable. He's very science-oriented. He wanted to believe it, but he couldn't bring himself to believe it because he's been taught not to believe it. And I was taught not to believe this stuff in my 20s, in my teens and my 20s, through a reasonably passive religious upbringing, but religious nonetheless. And scientifically, we're told not to believe it. Religiously, we're told not to believe it. But people have these experiences a lot. Millions of people have them. And they're valid. To the minds of those people, they're absolutely valid. So, look, I could talk all night about the validations and the way she comes through to prove that she's fine. But the lesson is that consciousness continues and love is eternal. And while we're here, let's make the most of it. Let's truly understand what it means to love and what it means not to love. To profoundly understand it's the experience of love and its absence. And the absence is opportunity. Where love is absent is the opportunity to be compassionate. Because that's what compassion does. It addresses suffering directly. The whole point of being compassionate is to address suffering. The world suffers immensely. We as humans suffer. It's part of life. It's part of the human experience. We need to bring ourselves to understand that more profoundly and to learn how to better do something about it. So in a really, really, really small way, Carolyn's passing is teaching me and hopefully other people that love does continue, that life is worthwhile, that the greatest reason for coming here is to understand that and to participate joyfully, in the words of Joseph Campbell, to participate joyfully in the sorrows of the world to make the world a better place. And we all have a mission in our own way, in our own time, to make that contribution in whatever small way we can. Jane Goodall said very similar things in her final interview on Netflix. It's worth a listen. So I think there's something quite nice about a journey of meaning and purpose which moves towards love and navigates adversity and tragedy as we move through life, with this central core premise that it's teaching us about virtue, it's teaching us about compassion, about kindness, about empathy, about trust, about truthfulness. And my lived experience in a crisis and adversity would validate that. And I think for me that's true of everybody in their own circumstance, in their own context, in their own way.
And that's a beautiful message that you have been learning through this experience.
Still learning, still trying to verbalise it, Gabby. I mean, this is the first time I've talked on a podcast about this. I've got the draft manuscript here from the book, which is half complete. So I'm probably giving the book away before I've even finished. But so I'm still learning to articulate this in language, in written form, in verbal form. It's very inarticulate. It's because the experiences themselves are quite ineffable, quite difficult to describe, quite difficult. Not so much difficult to describe, but difficult to get across the felt experience. The differentiation between just having thoughts and having intuition is really subtle. It's not obvious. It takes a lot of mindfulness practice, a lot of conscious awareness, a lot of peaceful mind, a lot of curiosity to pick up that very subtle distinction between is my mind making this up or is this being inspired? And I don't know how to describe that in any other way. But people have it, and people would say, yes, I agree with what he's saying, but I struggle to explain it. And I'm still struggling to explain it on this podcast. Maybe come back in 12 months, we can do it again.
Yes, well, it'll be in your book by then.
Yeah, it'll be in my book by then, absolutely.
Carolyn will help you get there.
She will.
But then looking back into your previous book, so Compassion in Disaster Management, the Essential Ethics of Relational Leadership. So if we can look further into relational leadership, where you argue that compassion isn't soft, that it's essential for crisis leadership, what convinced you of that?
A couple of things. I think life taught me that as I navigated through my career, and I worked out that, and I published on this for years, that the greatest measure of success. I was asked the question when I became Director General, what did you learn through your career before I went to the Commonwealth level? And it was a big question. I had no idea to answer that. And there was a series of fires in Western Australia where no one died, but houses were destroyed and the community was really unhappy. And same thing happened in Canberra. People died in Canberra in 2003. They died in Victoria in 2009. They died in the Queensland floods in 2011. And there was something about the sector which we weren't getting. And I think I worked out that the greatest measure of success was the upholding of public trust and confidence. Because we couldn't control the death rates, we couldn't stop death, we couldn't stop destruction, we couldn't do much about those things. So those numbers were pretty useless. People were feeling hurt, were feeling aggrieved, were feeling sad. And the greatest mission was the reduction of suffering, human and non-human. In other words, to be compassionate. And those two ethics fell out of my lived experience and fell out of an existential question I was asked just before I joined the Commonwealth. And I tested them and continued to test them, and they continued to be true. So I say to leaders a lot that, upholding public trust and confidence in public life or institutional life is really important. And if you take the focus off that, you're probably on the wrong path. And it's the role of every human who has access to the equities of power, wealth and resource to think about the plight of other people. How can you use those equities to make somebody else's life better? And I think that's the obligation of every leader. I really do. I think it doesn't end there, but it starts with how do you as a leader who have access to money, power, wealth, resource, how do you use it to the best effect to help people achieve some sense of happiness, some sense of wellness, and some sense of flourishing, which is what every human being wishes for. You and I and everybody listening wants to be happy, wants to be well, and wants to maximise their human life. And it doesn't matter your race, culture, creed, religion, sexuality, or anything, gender, or anything else. We all have that wish. We all have that wish. And wouldn't it be good if we understood that just a little bit more than perhaps that we do, and moved in that direction a little bit more than we are at the moment? I think that would make a big difference. So leaders have access to equities, and if they put the compassion as maybe not at the top of the list because it's hard to hold it there, but one of the top things in the list of things to think about and to be mindful about, I just think we end up with a better world.
And to be giving as much good as we can to help others get through life as well as they can.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. People will reluctantly admit this, but I've seen it I used to sit on the Bravery Decorations Council with the Governor, for the Governor General. And you'd see people commit extraordinary acts of bravery and really struggle to admit that it made them feel happy in a profoundly deep way. That they shifted their consciousness from self to other, that they were selfless in their acts, that they forgot about themselves and thought more about the other person. What comes out of that, which people find it really hard to talk about and describe, there's happiness there because self-interest and self-importance has been pushed aside. Selflessness has turned up, non-self has turned up, and non-self has helped somebody else in adverse circumstances. There's joy in that, there's happiness there. And we know this just by helping children, by helping old people, by helping somebody cross the street who's incapacitated. There's a feeling of happiness there. We almost feel ashamed to admit it, or it's overwhelming. Some people who committed brave acts that I saw in the Bravery Decorations Council ended up with PTSD because the shock of the act, the shock of selflessness was not something they were prepared for. So again, hard to explain, but when you shift consciousness from self to other, notions of identity disappear. Who you thought you were is no longer who you are. It happened to me in 1994 in the Sydney fires. I had to navigate what's now called PTSD. I remember having this existential crisis where I thought I knew who I was before the fires, but after the fires I didn't know who I was anymore. So my mind had opened up, my heart had opened up in a way that I hadn't forecast or foreshadowed or foreseen, or had been explained to me that's likely to happen when you step into the realm of adversity, when you put your life in danger, when you try and help somebody else. There's going to be a shattering of your ego, there's going to be a shattering of your sense of self, and something else over time will emerge which is much more complex, much more profound, much more sophisticated. Nobody taught me that. I had to work it out for myself. Now, ironically, Joseph Campbell, the great comparative mythologist, wrote about this stuff in 1948, I think, or 47, called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I won't go into the depth of his work, but he talked about this shifting of consciousness from self to other through the hero's journey. And so the greatest journey of the hero was not to be egotistical, was to be compassionate in the pain. When we discover our compassion, we discover the Grail. So the Grail myth is a very complex mythology, but it's not Monty Python. It could be Monty Python. Monty Python did a spoof of it, but
it's not the Spanish Inquisition.
It's not the Spanish Inquisition. That's right. So look, I'm confusing things here, but the point of my message is that compassion fundamentally is the shifting of consciousness from self to other. You become more interested in the needs of somebody else than your own needs, and in doing that, that's the pathway to being a happier human being. It just is, and we know it through lived experience. We don't need philosophy for that. We don't need science for that. Lived experience will tell you when you do something for somebody else out of a selfless act, you'll feel good about it.
And anyone who's listening is probably having a memory of when they did perform a selfless act and how it made them feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And there could be feelings of shame because they hadn't done it earlier, or hadn't done more of it, or for some people missed the opportunity where they could have been that way and didn't. And that's all fine. That's all part of the lived experience. It's all part of learning. Mm-hmm. I remember in the Canberra fires in 2003, I told this story many times, I published on it. I was asked to, the 18th of January 2003, which is the day that Canberra burned to the ground, or much of Canberra burned to the ground. That morning I was asked to come to Canberra to try and convince the local authorities to take more resource because they were of the view they didn't need any further assistance from New South Wales. And the New South Wales Commissioner had a different view, and he formed that view on the 15th of January, and the authorities couldn't agree on strategy and tactics. So by the 18th, the New South Wales Commissioner was extremely concerned about what was about to happen and asked me to go to Canberra to see if they could take more resource. So I headed to Canberra from Sydney, arrived in the operations centre, met one of the officers in charge on the day, who I'll call Bill, and he said to me, he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I've been asked by the Commissioner to see if you need any further assistance." And he said, "I've already told you, Commissioner, that's not necessary." I said, "Oh, look, be that as it may, would you mind giving me a brief?" And he briefed me in, and I became increasingly concerned that he was misreading the situation. And we just couldn't reach agreement. And he dismissed me and walked off and said he had other things to do. And I remember walking out of that operations centre going white as a ghost, feeling cold and clammy, nearly throwing up. Because I doubted myself. I thought, wow, after 20 odd years and everything I'd been through and seen and witnessed and learned about, because I saw the fire as I came into Canberra, it was the biggest fire I'd seen in my 20 odd years. And I thought, have I got this wrong? And then intuition kicks in and says, no, you don't have it wrong, he does. And I thought, what do I do now? He's told me to go away. I've got no power, authority, resource, nor permission to do anything. So I had this ethical dilemma. In ethics, it's called nomos versus physis, law versus ethics. So logically, rationally, reasonably, there's nothing more I can do. The law says no, he says no. I'll break the law if I do anything. But ethically, I had to do something. So I went back into my jurisdiction in New South Wales and directed the local superintendent to release task forces into Canberra against the wishes of the officer in charge on the day. I could not have done that, maybe I could have just gone with the reasonable approach and said nothing more I can do, and I would have been fine. But could I have slept well at night? Probably not. I'm just glad I had the moral conscience and the intestinal fortitude, as much as it nearly made me throw up, to do something about the problem. And I remember, this is all through reflexive practice, I remember that it wasn't about me being a hero. It was about the people who were about to be suffering immensely from the fire that was coming into Canberra, that I could see and intuit was going to happen. That's where my focus was. I didn't really think about the fact I could lose my job. It took until the coroner's court sat some 12 months later for me to be exonerated. I was lauded by the court for the decision and lauded by the media for the decision, but up until that 12 months preceding the court action, I didn't know whether I'd keep my job or not, because I broke the law. I went against it. I went against his directive.
But what did your actions achieve?
Not as much as I would have liked. There was confusion on the fireground about some of that resource, but some of it did get in. Some of it was able to provide assistance, so there was some positive effect. But the politics between the two jurisdictions got in the way, which I won't talk too much about now. It's complex. It's all recorded. It's recorded in the transcripts of the coroner's inquiry, what actually happened. So it's unfortunate, but so look, it doesn't always end up well. But it's kind of not the point. It's the intentionality that you have that sits behind your decisions. I think that's important, and where it lands is where it lands. So the lesson for me, and the lesson I teach leaders is, look, when you've got this challenge between law and ethics should always take precedence. And particularly if you're acting compassionately and you're acting selflessly. Mm-hmm. And I'll say to leaders, when you're in that predicament, get rid of as much of your ego as you possibly can and think as much about the other people as you possibly can, and then make your choice and be prepared to live with your choice. Because the consequences can be enormous. It can be very big.
They can be, because you would have had that inquiry hanging over your head for the next 12 months.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
So then people have to know that they have the strength and courage to face the results if it won't go as well as they anticipate it to.
Exactly. That's right. And that's why I say compassion is not weak. It takes a lot of courage. I mean, on reflection, I didn't think I was courageous on the day. I was what's the word? Scared's the wrong word, but just I don't know how to describe that experience other than I just knew it was the right thing to do. But there's a lot of fear there and a lot of anxiety and a lot of, boy, I could get into trouble. But the overriding premise was that people needed assistance. And that overrode everything else.
Yeah, and then you did what you did to be able to help them.
Yeah, did as much as I could possibly do, mm-hmm. and had to live with the consequence of that. So compassion is not weak. Compassion takes courage and it takes strength.
Mm-hmm. Well, these are beautiful lessons that you are sharing with me right now, and I am learning so much myself. And I have always been a very curious person, so
Good.
I understand having that. And for listeners who aren't in crisis leadership but are navigating their own challenges, where do they begin with ethical growth? With these sorts of messages, to
Yeah.
have compassion?
Compassion is innate. It's part of who we are. It's a natural part of who we are. People think that if you get rid of ego or self-interest, that there's nothing there. We get annihilated. The opposite is true. When the mind relaxes, then we naturally become more compassionate, more loving, more accessible, more humble, more virtuous. That's the natural state of mind. So I think we need to disavow the notion that non-self means annihilation, which means we don't exist. I would say to people, the adversities of your lived experience are great teachers. And you'll only know it by reflection. So when you're in the middle of adversity, just do the best you can. Do whatever you think is the right thing to do. Just whatever that looks like, just do whatever you think is the right thing to do. When you're through it and you have a chance to catch your breath and think about what happened, be reflexive and ask, what did I learn? What did it teach? And it'll be something about virtue, something about kindness to self and other, compassion to self and other, trustworthiness, truthfulness, empathy. Those things will turn up as being the antidotes to the suffering that's arisen from the adversity. And it's been true in every circumstance that I've been through personally. And I look at other people's circumstances and adversities, and I can see their truth sits in the middle of that as well. So I teach this to my kids. Well, my kids, when Carolyn passed away, just naturally stepped into the breach. The most compassionate human beings. I was deeply aggrieved and all that comes with it. And they helped me with the funeral, they helped me with the eulogy, they helped me with the arrangements, they helped me with the wake. They just stepped in and ran towards my suffering without question. Without question, I didn't have to ask them once. They just did it. And I look back on that and I think, well, that's their natural disposition. It's not just parenting. It's their natural disposition. But isn't it nice to know that my lived experience and my conversations with them on some way, shape or form has probably rubbed off in a greater or lesser degree. I was so proud of them.
Was it a surprising feeling to have, to recognise that? Because it's something that you live your life to do your best for others to have a good life and for them to feel good.
Yeah.
And then for you to feel it as well. Was that a moment of recognition?
Yeah, I think it is. I say in my book I talk about recognition has to be bestowed, it can't be proclaimed. So you can have a thought that you're a compassionate human being, or I can have a thought that I'm a compassionate human being, but it only gets validated when someone else recognises it. And so I was able to validate my children's compassion independently of what they thought they were doing. So I think that's important, that people external to you recognise that's the way you're being, that's the validation. You can have the thought that you are being that way. I think that's quite okay, that's perfectly okay. But sometimes you hear people think they're being compassionate and they're not. So validation has to come from the person who's receiving it, not the person who's giving it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just a bit of a closing reflection. What do you hope someone listening today feels braver to do?
Be curious about your life. Be curious metaphysically. Don't believe everything you read, whether it's metaphysical or otherwise. Not everything is true. Not just because somebody says it on Facebook doesn't mean it's true. But trust your lived experience. Be curious about your life, about your dream state, about your intuitions, about your circumstances, about your adversities. Just be curious and ask the question, what am I learning here? What is it I need to learn? What is it I need to contribute? Because it's all worthwhile. I really don't know how else to frame it. As I said about 20 minutes ago, I'm still putting a language to this experience. It's this whole metaphysical experience with Carolyn's passing is unique in my life. It hasn't happened to me before, and I'm still crafting language and trying to understand its deeper and more profound meaning. So, unfolding story. But just be curious about life. It's I say to people in my lectures that the two greatest journeys you'll ever take is coming here and leaving, because you have to do them on your own. So we're born through our mothers, That's true of everybody. But we take the journey on our own. We're then received at the other end, and off we go for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. And then we leave on our own. And everything in between is a great adventure. So we're all born, we all die. My proposition is that in between times, see life as a great adventure, make the most of it. Find as much joy and happiness as you can, and navigate as much of your adversity as possible with an open heart and as much compassion as you can muster. And know that consciousness continues beyond physical death. We don't die. We die physically. We don't die mentally. And be curious about that. That's all I'd say about it. Just be curious about it. Ask questions. Read about it. Study it. Be skeptical. Look for validation. Look for not so much hard scientific proof, but sufficient evidence to satisfy your own conscience that could be true. And what might that mean for you? What I say to people a lot: what would you want to take with you on that journey to whatever realm that is? I've got no idea where it is. I just know it continues. What would you want to take with you? What would you want to leave behind? What if you had to face the truth of your life? Because we all have to face it. We all make a mess. I'm still making a mess. There's no perfection in my life, I can promise you that. And many people I've led would attest to that very proposition, I suspect. So we all make mess. What does that mess look like on the other side? What is it that it will show us and teach us? And what can we do between now and death to change that proposition? So can I treat myself better? Can I treat other people better? I think the answer is profoundly universally, we can all do better. We can all do better in that space.
Wow, that is huge, but that is remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts with me.
You're welcome.
And I look forward to reading the resulting book that will come of it.
So do I.
Bye for now.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks.
Mark, thank you. Honestly. What I enjoyed about talking with you is that even when you are speaking about subjects as heavy as disaster, leadership failure, or human vulnerability, you still bring this grounded confidence that compassion actually works. And that studying ourselves, our fallibility, our fear, our habits, is not soft, it's necessary. If you are listening and feeling like the world is a little chaotic, welcome. You are human. And this conversation is such a beautiful reminder that compassion isn't just a moral idea. It's a practical tool for daily life. Whether you are leading hundreds of people or just trying to lead yourself through the day, the inner work matters. All the links to Mark's book, his writing, and ethical intelligence are in the show notes. I'd strongly recommend diving into his allegorical life blog, where he explores everything from virtue ethics to moral humility to, yes, we have metaphysics exploration underway. Mark, thank you for your time, your wisdom, and your extraordinary heart for people. And if you are listening, go be a little more compassionate today. It actually does change things. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and I'll see you for the next cup of tea.